Is it about that time? 1:15? Okay. Just a quick show of hands. Can distributors, can you just get a quick hand if you're a distributor? Or if you're an actual manufacturer, end user? Okay. Okay, good. All right, good. Nothing against distributors, right? My name is Tim Winard. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Kitagawa-NorthTech. We're very well known for work holding systems, whether it's for turning or milling. And I hope I don't disappoint anyone here this afternoon, but this program has absolutely nothing to do with work holding. What we've done with AMT and their partner who's organized these conferences is to put together a subject matter that I think all of us here, including yourselves, are going to appreciate. And that is, as manufacturers today, it's a good time to be a manufacturer in the United States. There is a tremendous amount of opportunity, despite what your friends, your family, and acquaintances might say, right? What do we hear? This is a bad time to be in manufacturing, right? You can't be competitive in the United States. Well, there is no manufacturing left in the United States, right? I mean, it's gone. And, I think we would beg to differ. And so what we've done is worked with a local manufacturer here in Chicago to work with to demonstrate how it is possible for any company in manufacturing today to experience accelerated growth. You don't want to hear me stand up here for an hour and to share what a person should do or a company should do or what they could be doing. What we did is we actually sent out an invitation to the local TMA organization, if you're familiar with the Tooling and Manufacturing Association here in Chicago. They represent hundreds of job shops, fab shops, those along those lines. And the week that we sent that out, actually the same day we sent it out, we had 12 companies that responded saying that they would love to work with us. And here was the pitch. The pitch we made was, would you like to experience double-digit growth from 15 to 20% annualized growth this year? Would you like to do so and get those results without purchasing any capital equipment, nor hiring any people? Okay, so that was the premise. And we narrowed that list down to 2 companies. Finally, we narrowed it down to one. That company's name is Abco Incorporated. They're here joining us in the front row, and appreciate having worked with their management team. Abco specializes in cutting tools, just specials, right? Carbide, high-speed steel, brazing, those things. End mills, reamers, any type of carbide cutting tool. So it's not Kitagawa's forte to know cutting tools, right? So here we are working with a company that we really don't know much about. But I think it really demonstrates the possibility of any organization today. So to kind of tell the story from Joe is second generation, right? Your second generation ownership? Third generation, okay. And to tell a story, rather than asking Joe to do so or for me, we've actually got a little video that we like to play, and it features Joe and Abco's experience in having worked with Kitagawa over a period of about 2 months, and what kind of came of their organization. So just bear with me. I'll try to bring this video up. Good.
Hi, I'm Joe, and a year ago I took over my dad's business. I was proud to continue my dad's legacy. My family was growing, and yeah, let's be honest, I was now the boss of a company I'd grown up in. Life was good. Well, maybe not so good. To tell you the truth, that's only what it looked like on the surface. Sure, I had vice president on the business card, but I was working so hard putting out fires, it was more like I was vice president of the complaint desk. Honestly, guys, I was in survival mode most of the time. You know how it is, my whole waking life is tied up in this company, and I knew my financial future was always hanging in the balance as I waited to see how much, if any money, was left over at the end of the month. I knew that changes needed to be made to grow profit. Who doesn't know that? But I didn't have a plan, and I sure as heck didn't have time to make one. My employees are older. Many were stuck in their ways, and getting them to shift gears seemed impossible at the time. Look, I'm a smart guy. I knew I had everything within the four walls of the organization to change. But what to change? What to change to? There was no one to lean on inside the company to lead the way out, and I was already stretched too thin. I hate to say it, but I wasn't seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. Then I got an email from Kitagawa inviting me to experience accelerated business growth in time for the IMTS show. Experience 20% annualized growth, no capital equipment purchases, no need to hire additional staff. In 3 months. I said yes. I signed up. And this is where my story really starts. Kitagawa analyzed my business. It was clear that there were no major operational bottlenecks, nor did we in fact require capital, brick and mortar, modernization, or additional employees. Most of the issues were associated with a tired team of just going through the motions, no particular sense of urgency, nor personal accountability, and underperforming suppliers. It became obvious to me very quickly that we were just drifting. The first thing Kitagawa did to focus the team was to identify the weakest link in our chain of operations. In this case, it was the heart of our company, the finish grinding department, where the business end of the cutting tool is completed. Kitagawa made it clear that focusing the team on improving the weakest link will strengthen the whole business. Of course, this wasn't an easy pill to swallow at first. Sure, it made common sense, but we had 50 years of experience under our belts. Had we been wrong? This is how Kitagawa broke it down for us. The finish grinding operations is where the real value of our business lies. The key element for my company was to understand that we needed to stop focusing on everything and concentrate on improving the output of only this department. When this one department is producing 100% of the time, the business will achieve its best possible output. Kitagawa then showed us what good looks like. The finish grinding department needed to be fully staffed, always producing, never permitted to run out of work. Our team learned all of the other operations must subordinate themselves to the finish grinding department. This wasn't easy to hear at first. Our workers now learn that they can't overproduce more than the weakest link can accept. When they do, this excess work just clogs the system and output slows. The next lesson learned was to focus on dollars sold instead of our tired method of labor hours earned. You don't sell labor hours. You sell products the customer is paying for. Kitagawa additionally educated us on our monthly shipping goal and performance we needed every day to meet this goal. Now that we had dollars in mind, the team started to grasp the cause and effect relationship actions taken that don't increase dollars shipped. This newfound clarity brought an end to the chaotic behavior that we once thought was the best we could do. In the end, our team has learned a process to improve operations. The weakest link has been identified, as well as the constraint to profitable growth. We now understand the importance of maximizing and protecting its output. Kitagawa helped us to see that not all resources are as important as others, and has shown us new measurements that directly affect our profit. Now it's up to us to learn that as the business improves, the constraints can and will move to new locations. Sustaining the newfound improvement to even higher levels will require the team to regularly check for the location of the weakest link and react accordingly. The commitment to become an ever-flourishing company is never-ending, but the results can bring huge rewards for those that dare to change. So let me ask you this. What do you want your growth to be next year?
This is a little bit of an interactive discussion. The content, the work that we had done with ABCO When we first started working with them, they had roughly a 6-week backlog of work. One of the things I learned about their business is that the average delivery being asked of by customers is about 4 weeks. So it took me a little bit to understand, well, if your lead time is 6 weeks, that means you got 6 weeks worth of work. Well, how are you able to match the market demand of a 4-week delivery? And so the first thing we went about was really trying to liberate the capacity of the organization. So you might say from a structural effort on our part was really to understand what could we do to liberate this capacity, right? No one wants to admit they have capacity, but every company, in fact, has a tremendous amounts of latent capacity. Let me see if I can bring this. No. Kristen, you want to give me a hand? Let's see. Okay. So as we start with that premise, is manufacturing really a good place to be today? Depends on where you're at. For ABCO, I think they would agree that right now is an excellent time to be manufacturing. We'll talk a little about some of the success they've experienced. But some of the challenges that we have today, yep, thank you. But some of the obstacles I think that we all recognize, and we hear it every day, whether it's magazines we read or the internet, are, for example, just a lack of capital equipment or access to capital, a shortage of skilled labor. We hear that every day. I can't find enough engineers. I can't find enough machinists, tool makers, surface grinders, etc. Just work ethics. I think we all have experienced that. No matter, so many of the young people we're hiring today lack really a good, solid work ethic. That doesn't mean everybody, right? But we're seeing a trend where there's a certain amount of entitlement that work should not be work, right? I mean, it feels hard. And of course, you have a growing population that is nearing retirement. The baby boomers are retiring. So at the same time, we've got this kind of an upsurge in the amount of manufacturing. You've also got now a large part of the population that's preparing to retire. So businesses today are faced with a number of these converging issues that all businesses have to face. But to spotlight ABCO, there were several mechanical things, you might say mechanical or structural things that we focused on. And I might just pose the question here, what significance would there be to exposing 15 to 25% capacity within any manufacturing operation? And that's a question for everyone here. What would be the benefit of doing so? And there's a bunch of them. You're not going to get it wrong. What would you do if you had this much capacity? Is there any benefit to that? New opportunities. Okay, can you say a little bit more about that? You're right. I agree with you.
Just new avenues for work. I mean, new revenue.
Okay. So if you've got capacity, you can sell it, right? You can sell capacity you have. What else? What else could we say regarding that? I'll give you a few. Okay. Your backlogs drop. Your deliveries get better. Your sales department is able to sell a shorter delivery, perhaps even better than your competitors. They can't compete with you. Your cash flow gets better. The prices, I won't go into prices right now, but we start looking at things from a variable cost perspective, right? Once your overhead is already covered by your book of business that you've currently got, any additional business you bring in on top of what you've currently got, well, it's already covered by your base, right? What's inside the four walls in the way of expenses is already covered. So whatever you sell, the only cost is that which you have to go into your pocket to pay for, right? We call it variable cost. Could be raw materials or any type of services that you may pay to have done on the outside, like heat treating or plating or whatever other type of things you don't do internally, right? And if you think about that in terms of a percentage of what you sell your goods for, it's minor, it's small. 10%, 20%, right, is your variable cost. That means 75 to 90% of the selling price is pure profit. Okay, we can talk about that concept later. Okay, then there's also no need for immediate capital equipment. If you have the capacity, well, the most logical reason you'd purchase capital equipment is to purchase capacity. But if you have capacity, well, then you can defer the need to make that investment, right? You don't need to have it. And of course, there's no reason to lose orders based on price or delivery. Of course, then what kind of reputation do you have? You're always on time. Your prices are so competitive, right? You've got a great model before you. So one of the things that we started with ABCO is, and this is true in most companies, it's true of Kitagawa ourselves, is you have to have a culture of accountability. So the first thing we want to do is we need everyone in the organization to be accountable for the company's success. It can't just be at the management level. I mean, it's true. Okay, great. Management is responsible. But it's only a small percentage of the number of employees in the organization. What would happen if we had everyone in the organization equally accountable for the success of the organization? Everyone's carrying their bucket of water, right? That's what we're all getting paid for. But how do you create that? Well, anyway, this Helen Keller says, alone we can do so little, together we can do so much. And the Oz principle really talks about that and how it leads to improved quality, customer satisfaction, of course the profitability, the fact of building teams, and just maximizing result and getting results, right? What's the saying? Don't confuse effort with results, right? We don't just show up to put our time in. The other thing was to, on top of accountability, was now to create a sense of urgency. If you don't have a sense of urgency, well, then just things take their time. They just kind of eventually will happen, maybe happen. One example that we worked through with ABCO was a process of, for example, something coming out of milling or turning. It then had to go out for heat treating. And then, well, it had some other subsequent operations, right? This is no different than any of you out there. But if we say, well, we're not quite sure when it's going to come out of milling, well, I mean, it'll come out when it comes out, right? Or if the attitude is, well, maybe today or maybe tomorrow we'll get something off to heat treating. Well, when's it going to come back from heat treating? Well, I mean, I don't know, 5, 6 days. And, well, how does it come back? We haven't worked that out yet, right? So what happens is things just kind of stretch out in time. Now, there was a moment in one of our meetings, we had a meeting every single morning with ABCO, I'd say almost every morning. One morning, we talked about a job that was supposed to come out of milling. And I tell you, when I heard it, I thought there was a misunderstanding. I said, okay, this was supposed to come out of milling yesterday. Where do we stand? And one of the gentlemen says, it just came back from heat treat. And I said, no, you misunderstood. This must be a different job. This job was supposed to come out of milling. Where is it at? No, it just came in from heat treat. And I said, I'm missing something. They said, well, you're right. It did come out of milling last night. But then last night we ran over to the heat treater, and then this morning on the way in, well, Joe, he picked it up and he brought it into the shop this morning. It's already back from heat treat. Okay? So what did that do? Well, it compressed the time it took to process that part by probably 75%, right? There was a compression. If you think about it, what is your lead time that you typically quote for any job? Just write that down, and again, I know there's exceptions, but there's a time that you're quoting, whether it's 4 weeks or 8 weeks, whatever that is for you. But what is the actual touch time to make that product? Literally, if you had no other jobs in the company, you had the one job, but you had all the current resources you have today. And everyone's standing there like a relay race. You ever see a 440 relay race, right? Everyone's kind of standing there ready to go, and they're just waiting for the baton to be brought. You ever notice how that handoff is? It's just seamless. There's no loss of efficiency in that handoff. It's almost like continuous one person running that race. Well, that's how it should be in a factory, a facility, right? That handoff moving that part along. So if you do have that one job, but you got all the current resources, can you imagine someone in sales saying, I just came from, here, sign for credit. The person says, here, just give it to me, I'll sign there for credit. The next person says, I'm in production, just give that job to me, give it to me, I'll run with it. Material says, yes, what kind of material do you need? I'll get that ordered, right? Can you imagine? That's what we call touch time. What is the ratio of your lead time to touch time? Right? If it's say a 5-to-1 ratio would be a healthy type of, would reflect the performance of the organization. Or do you have a lot of white time? White time meaning that job is sitting. It's in the company, but it's just sitting. It's not moving. And that's really what we wanted to do, is create really a sense of urgency to move the jobs along with but you got to have accountability. Because if people don't feel accountable, well, then it's just going to get dropped along the way, right? So those are two of the things that we did. The next, there's this screen kind of highlights a couple of things. One is complacency. Could that represent the culture in place today, where there isn't, it doesn't really matter what I do, there is no sense of urgency, it really doesn't much matter, I punch in, I punch out, okay? Or is there a sense of false urgency, where people are busy, but nothing is truly getting accomplished for the benefit of the organization? This slide here is this is a true 1970s technology. I think you'll be very unimpressed. It's a simple scheduling board that we've been using, sometimes referred to as a velocity board. But what it does is it creates both. It creates both that accountability and creates a sense of urgency without you literally having to tell your team, I want you to be more accountable, I want there to be a sense of urgency. What the board does is it more or less is kind of a little bit of a feel of kind of that hot potato, right, where you kind of pass the potato and it's hot and you want to get rid of it. What we have is a series of columns. You can see the numbers here more clearly, 4 or 5. But each of these columns, there's in this case there's 3 green, 3 yellow, 3 red, for a total of 9. Each of those columns represents a business day. No holidays, no weekends, just working days. And what we've done is populated. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Now I'm going the wrong way. Each column is populated with a series of tickets. Every ticket, this being just a blank version of that, contains the job, right? The ticket could have the quantity, the part numbers, what type of it is, maybe the sales order, a little bit of intelligence about it that everyone would recognize what that is when you talk about it. In ABCO's case, we also listed a check mark that the material was in the company, it was ready to go, that there was in fact enough carbide. If it required carbide, it was with the job, right? We refer to it as a full kit. We also put in operation the list in the order in which the work goes. It's very important. Each of your companies will have a different type of a workflow. We also have an estimate of how much time it would take for each of those operations to be done. Well, what we do is every day we review these travelers, as we call them, and by seeing who actually, I don't keep doing that. By looking at who actually signed out last, I think it's this one, signed 2, and this is when it was completed, and that's also the name. I think there's a person's name gets put on here. But whoever last checked out or checked off, we know it has to be with that next operation. So every morning, every day, there's a stand-up meeting with everyone on their team, and we'd say, it's with milling. Who's got that? Oh, John, you've got that. Okay, so John, and there's only one question we would ask. When will it be done? And in the beginning, John might say things because who wants to be nailed down to a time? This is where that accountability starts getting created because you're going to hear every answer but the answer you want to hear, which is when will it be done? Someone may say, well, I'm going to start on it today. Or I need to look at that, right? What I'm describing is a little bit of the resistance that you would get, and of course in ABCO's case they got. But it took a little bit of time before we actually got someone to say, I'll be done this morning. And we would thank that individual for committing. We didn't care about the precision. We just wanted to get a sense of accountability. And so every day, their team would come up here and sign off. They would take then the next oldest job. The jobs here on column 9 were the oldest jobs. It's kind of a FIFO system. And column 1 were the jobs that were just put on today. And literally every morning before the meeting, someone would be assigned to advancing those tickets just one day, one column. So every day, there are jobs getting close to column 9. The rule was don't go past day number 9, okay? So that meant that all resources were really focused on how do we get those jobs off the board. And every day we celebrated the fact when they said it's going to ship today. We take a little post-it note, something very simple, post it on there with a letter S. We loved post-it notes with letter S because it meant that that's going to ship. The company can now celebrate the improvements that were made. Any questions about this? This particular board system, I know it's I'm going kind of fast and there's a lot of behavioral connection to this that it may not be so simple. But anyway, every day we'd advance those. We would load up the board with a certain number of jobs that correlated to the constraint of the organization. In their case, it was surface grinding and cutter grinding. So we wanted to make sure that we always loaded up that operation with enough jobs in every day. We were releasing 30, 40 hours of cutter grind, surface grind per day to make sure that we never starved that operation. Because if that operation went zero, what do you think was going to happen that particular day when they went to work? There wouldn't be any work, right? So we wanted to make sure we always had plenty of buffer in front of that area of their business. Some of the things we're talking about, though, is really managing change. Now, I know it sounds like this all just kind of happened, but there was a lot of resistance along the way, right? As the video just highlighted, we were changing 50, 60 years worth of history. These are things that they just hadn't done before. It just didn't, intuitively, it may not have made sense. And so we look at an organization kind of laying on an equilateral triangle, the way it's kind of sitting there. It just loves to sit on that nice flat surface. But management's role is to advance the organization. You're essentially grabbing the corner of that triangle and you're lifting it. But not everyone's happy about you trying to move forward, right? You've got equal number of people, maybe even more, on the other side of that triangle, kind of jumping on it. They're trying to get it to go back down, right? Because, well, you're rocking the boat. But management needs to get enough individuals behind it to rally, to kind of get enough momentum to roll that triangle forward. And so we see there a triangle kind of tipping, kind of pivoting on that little point there. It can go either way. At that point, it could fall back or it could go forward. But I can guarantee you, if it goes back, you are never, ever going to pick up that quarter and get that thing to roll forward. Because the second it goes back, you are going to hear every member of the team that was so far against it say, you see that? I told you. I told you it wasn't going to work. Yep, I knew that wasn't going to happen. So it's so important to really push for change. The little blue triangle really shows what happens after a number of iterations of change. When you can move it forward, you start breaking the edge off that sharp corner, and progress happens more easily each time. In Abco's case, as I shared earlier, their original lead time was 6 weeks. It wasn't competitive. The market wanted 4 weeks or better. I mean, how do you compete with another company that's, the average industry average was 4 weeks? Well, over the course of about 5 weeks of working together, we were able to run that backlog down to about 2.5 weeks. They were going to run out of work, literally run out of work in about 3 weeks. So we went to their sales group and we said, listen, we have an interesting situation. You're about to run out of work. Sales team says, that's impossible. There's no way, there's only 2.5 weeks. I said, no, I got the data right here. It's 2.5 weeks. It's no, there's no way. I said, well, what are you talking about? He says, well, in the same last month, we've boosted the amount of orders coming to the company by 25%. So there's no way you could be running out of work. We've been throwing 25% more work into the hopper. Well, I didn't know that. I didn't know they were doing that. But I thought, what even a better story here than not only did we take their current load of work and get it down, they've been throwing 25% more work into the hopper at the same time we were running the operation out of work. Right? What a great situation. But it was still a problem. Within probably about 3 weeks, they literally going to run out of work as a company. And all that inertia we'd gotten done out in the shop was going to come to a screeching halt once they realized there's no more work. So working with their sales team, we put together a couple plans to discuss what explains why you're losing business. Why aren't you getting all of it? We want 100% of all of the jobs. And we talked about some of the reasons why that maybe they weren't winning the entire program's worth of parts. So we talked about pricing, we talked about deliveries, and taking advantage of the shorter lead times. Also, we talked about variable costs and how to requote things. Well, I'm happy to say that after a little over 2 months, this month, although it was only 1 week into September, okay, it's only 1 week, they are on track to double their sales in the month of September over the previous months. Now, doubling sales sounds impressive. The more impressive thing is that, remember, they didn't spend any money in any more capital equipment. They didn't hire anybody. The costs of inside the four walls of their business remained the same. So the only difference was the variable cost was the only thing that went into producing this 2 times sales. So you're talking about some hefty profit on the second, right? If you're going to double your sales, but let's just, it's their number. I'm not privy to their number, but let's just say their variable cost was, say, 20%, right? And that's 80% profit on the doubling of sales, right? So you're talking about a possible 5, 6, 7 times more profit this year than otherwise. That is the potential. That is the possibility that we're so excited that any manufacturer today can experience. You ever see those little advertisements that says results not typical, like those weight loss programs, you know, like results aren't typical. Okay, these results are typical. Anybody here can experience that. So as the video ended, let me ask you, what is your profit goal this year? We had offered a 15 to 20% growth opportunity, knowing it would be far more than that. The reason we dumbed the number down is because nobody would have believed us if we said they could experience a 500 or 600% growth. It just doesn't happen today. But that can be anyone's number here today. Well, anyway, if you had any, I try to make this more interactive, but I'm sure there's some questions you might have pertaining to some of the work that we did with them. The gentlemen from ABCO are here up front. Any particular questions? To me, it seems so logical, but you know, when this is all we're doing, there has to be some. Is there any questions that maybe fill in some of the blanks behind some of the things that we did with them? I know we talked about accountability, a sense of urgency, and then a scheduling system. But I'm guessing that alone wouldn't be enough to assist. Yes, sir.
How do you sustain that growth, that sense of urgency throughout? Because I'm sure 63 years ago they started out pretty strong, and then over time it just degrades. But how do you sustain that?
Excellent question. His question, in case you didn't hear, was how do you sustain that growth? It really starts with management. I think I'd shared that we had started we narrowed this group down to 2 companies. The other company that we had started working with, unfortunately, they loved the idea of what was being offered, right? They loved that concept. But in the end, the management essentially says, we want these benefits. We want to experience that. Our business is going down. We need to turn things around. But we don't want to change anything to get it. And so it starts with management. It starts with ownership saying, we are going to do what it takes to get it. That's really the goal of the organization, is to be an ever-flourishing, profitable organization. It starts with management. It starts with the ownership. You've got to keep pushing the envelope. Where ABCO's at right now, it's really great to see that. But you can't stop where they're at. They have to keep developing that. It's not a theoretical lesson like you take a class and you say, oh, I know that. Everything we're talking about is behavior-based. And you can't change behavior in a matter of 2 or 3 months. It's a good start, but it's going to take a year or years to really make that a part of the culture, that there is a sense of urgency, that to be accountable. Again, you can't just absorb that. So it really starts with management, starts and ends with management. But it's exciting to see how far they've come. Yes, sir.
I guess what kind of ways did they keep their employees motivated? Granted, it's only been a couple months. I just know from experience, like I've worked in some companies before, where it was years of just go, 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 go. And after so many years of go, 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 you almost feel like a lack of planning on your part does not constitute an emergency on mine. But if they're selling emergencies, I mean, does it have to do with more scheduling type of a thing, or just I guess it's the morale of the actual workers themselves. How do you keep them, I guess, feel more important and not like
a cog in the wheel?
Management is kind of like a slave driver.
Sure.
Type of a deal.
Right. It's probably all in the way I also kind of described urgency, right? This urgency was not about a whip and a stick, right? We weren't so precise about the accuracy of people's reply to when will the job be done. We really didn't care. If, for example, there was one of the tickets had a particular operation that said about an hour's worth of work. We know, because that's just the way it is, there is a lack of precision with estimates. It is just that. It's an estimate. So if someone were to say, it's going to take me an hour, great. That's all we're looking for is the commitment. If it took them an hour and a half or took them 45 minutes, we really didn't much care. The real problem is that it was taking, for example, 5 hours to do a 1-hour job. So all we were trying to do is get commitment to something that was a reasonable estimate. The other organization that we had started working with really resisted this whole approach to their staff. I'll give you the short story. They were in turning screw machines, screw work, and I'm trying to think. There was another type of turning there involved, Swiss turn. We would ask the same question. Now, they believed that their constraint to the operation was they didn't have enough setup people. They really wanted to hire more setup people, claimed they couldn't find more setup people. We already knew there's no way they're going to need any more people. It was just really the way that they were not utilizing their people properly. So we asked the same question of their setup person. When will this job be done? The owner interjected and ran interference on behalf of every employee when we asked that question. The answer was like, well, how would he know? How would he know? What if he doesn't have the right tools? What if he didn't have the right material? Right? What if, right? And we said, okay, yeah, but let's just say, exceptions aside, when will he be done? Well, if he gets, this was by the way, this was like on a Wednesday or Thursday. The owner says, well, if he gets done by Monday, they'd be fine. If he gets done by Monday, that'd be fine, right? Well, we just looked at the operator and said, when are you going to be done? He says, 3 o'clock today. So what is the difference there? What was the difference for the business? Okay, the owner was okay if it took 3 or 4 more days to do a job that just by asking the operator was today. And we didn't care if it was 3 o'clock. We didn't care if it was 4 o'clock. The fact he was going to say today was, that was 4 times faster than whatever would have taken place had we not been there to ask the question. So it's really just about starting by asking questions. You know what? Everyone wants to do a good job. And this is not about precision. You're never going to be precise. But we did help. There are certain things that can be done to help people, though. For example, like a setup person is having a full kit. Like before they start the job, could someone have made sure that that operator or that setup person had the right tools, had the right materials? I mean, could somebody have done that ahead of time to have minimized what that owner was so theorizing could happen? Well, absolutely. The problem is we hadn't gotten that far with this company. We couldn't even have it. We weren't really allowed to have a conversation with their own staff. But we'd run interference this way with everyone on their team. Like something didn't ship. We said, well, this was supposed to have shipped. Well, it's going to ship today. What's the big deal? Well, the big deal is we committed to shipping that yesterday. Where's the person that's in charge of shipping? Right? Well, it's going to ship today. Anyway, that's kind of more the. I gave a very long-winded answer. It's really about trying to get some commitment today. What can get done today? And we're not really concerned about the precision of that. Yes, sir.
How would you deal with management or ownership that wants those commitments to be overly precise?
We would stop that. We would discourage that. It makes no sense. You are going to discourage people. They can't, unless you're doing something to help them be more precise with the estimates. Like, for example, we call them full kits. Now, we haven't gotten that far with ABCO, nor with this other organization, but eventually you're going to have people that you're going to find are wasting a lot of time looking for tools, right? Like, for example, in their case, they're cutter grind, service grind. If they're walking around looking for tools, or where's the material, or oh, I got to go saw cut my own material. Okay, we don't want that. We want them to just doing the one thing that they can do, because whatever goes through the constraint represents the throughput of the entire organization, right? If it doesn't go through that operation, you're not going to get any. You can't go to the bank yet. So there are certain things that you can do to kind of make it easier on people to be a little bit more precise, but that would come quite a bit later, and we would discourage management from trying to be precise. It's not needed. There's so many more other low-hanging fruit that precision is just, it would take you years before you need to get precise with that type of stuff. That's not where the opportunity is. Yes, sir.
What would you recommend in applying this clothing for an operation that does mostly repair type work on one-off, two-off projects that are often, the deliveries are uncertain because of unforeseen issues that come up oftentimes? There's no repeat standardized process or product. It's more of an individualized. What would you suggest?
It's still project management, right? There's still resources that represent the one thing that is, if we walked into anyone's facility, there's going to be a pile of work. There could be multiple piles, but you're going to have one area usually that represents the bigger constraint, right? The little illustration was used with a chain, right? We all know that a chain has only one weakest link, right? And so in any organization, you have the same thing. It comes down to planning. There was a story one time shared with me. It was called a blue light special. That's Kmart. The blue light story, all right? Blue Light was a consultant that I know that was hired by a heavy truck company, and they were doing some welding. And this particular facility said they wanted to expand onto the building and add more welding capacity. Okay, this consultant didn't know a thing about welding. All right, so here he is going into an operation. He's been asked by corporate to go into the subsidiary to double check, do they really need all this added expense of adding onto the building and adding more people, etc. All right, but he didn't know anything about welding. The only thing he could think of was that he expected to see blue light, right, off the arc of the welding. So when he walked in there, the plant manager, of course, is not happy to see him. He's there to shut his deal down if he can, right, because the plant manager wants this, right, this facility. So as they watch, the welder on the left is welding, gets done, taps his buddy on the shoulder on the right, comes over, helps him pick up this bumper. It was a bumper. Lift the bumper up onto a pallet. They would unload another bumper. This gentleman would go back to his welding. This gentleman would start pulling the plastic. They would wrap the bumpers in plastic. Strips the plastic off the bumper, gets his little gusset, puts the gusset in there, does his little bit of welding. Oh, there's some blue light. And he repeats. The job is done. He puts it all back in the bumper, or the bumper back on the pallet. He proceeds to shrink wrap the bumper, or the pallet with all the bumpers on there. Looks at his ticket, says, okay, that next job. So he gets a forklift, pulls the pallet out, and, well, there's my next job. That's the third one back. Okay. Well, then he pulls the two pallets out, right? Pulls the pallet out that he needs, brings it up, sets it down, puts the other two pallets back, and the plant manager says, listen, he knows we're watching him, right? He knows. He's working all out. You can't tell me he's not busy. But what was it that you didn't see? Didn't see any blue light. Very little of the time spent was blue light. So all they just simply do is, if that's your constraint, that means you've got resources upstream and downstream of that operation. So they did. They grabbed a young individual to kind of come over and be a helper. Right? All the helper had to do was line up the next job, strip the plastic off. When it was time to weld, load it on there, let the guy weld, unload it, keep the welder doing what the welder can only do. And it's the same thing with your operation. If it's an assembly production, you've got resources. If that's where the constraint's at, and that's the one thing that you need, is you've got lots of resources upstream and down. I mean, by definition, you have to have other resources upstream and downstream if that is the constraint. You have to. So taking another individual to help out that area, make sure that it's got the full kit, whether it's a seal kit or tools or spare parts, maybe doing a partial disassembly, maybe doing some prior inspection work, maybe getting the manual out, getting the affected documents. So anything that would help that person to carry out an assembly work more effectively would go right to your bottom line. I hope that long answer answered your question. Anything else? Any other questions? It's 1:58. Okay. Well, if you had any questions, like I said, the gentleman from ABCO up front, and I'd be happy to have any conversations with you afterwards. Thank you very much for coming.